Thanks again for tuning into another episode of Reach. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about bullying. Bullying statistics are extremely high for those on the spectrum. Of the reported cases, it is currently at about 68% here in the United States, but that is only those who have come forward and reported it, and doesn't include those who may not know that they're even being bullied.
And, it's really sad to hear that this is something that is even happening within the autistic community. Unfortunately, that percentage that you said, Conrad, it doesn't include those who are not able to communicate when they've been bullied or even understand, how bullying may be perceived to that person as well.
Or who to report it to. I've had
Ex-
instances of my own situations where I don't know who to tell.
Yeah, I've been in the same exact boat. And bullying doesn't just happen, at school. Bullying can happen anywhere, even at your own home. Being bullied by my own family members is something that has happened in my lifetime. So you can only imagine, a place that you're supposed to come to that is supposed to make you feel safe. And then suddenly, oh, hey, by the way, now let's go ahead and make you feel like this at home too.
Oh, I lived that for many years myself.
No one should have to live like that. Nobody should have to wake up and then have their identity dismissed or invalidated and be told, oh, you are just so stupid, you're so this, you're so that. Like, say being a part of that is just absolutely disgusting to me.
Oh, I had the opposite. Oh, you shouldn't you shouldn't be failing job applications. You're smart. You're doing this on purpose.
And I don't understand that. People that will say those types of things, you don't know our lived experience. You don't know what it's like to be in our shoes. I've even been told myself, when I've actually come out and said, hey, I'm also autistic, people have actually said I'm lying because I don't look like your typical autistic person. And it's like, well, first of all, autism doesn't have a look. And second of all, for you to say that invalidates my entire identity. So, especially being a female autistic person.
Yeah, I come out and tell everybody that I'm on the spectrum, and they're like most of the people that used to know me, like I wouldn't have suspected. Others that are a little bit more understanding and are more familiar with it, are like looking back, yeah, I could see it now.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? When the people who are like, yeah, I could now that I think about it, yeah, I can tell that you're autistic. I actually had a friend who came up to me and was like, I can actually tell you're autistic when you're mad. And it's so interesting because when I've gotten mad too, I've gotten bullied because of the fact that when I do get mad, I'm not able to truly communicate how I feel. And because of that, that has led people to say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're so stupid. It just amalgamation of things ends up happening.
Yeah, for me, part of the reason I had issues like talking about some of the things I was dealing with is anytime I get into that agitated state, my brain doesn't want to cooperate with me and just turns off. So I can't have a heated argument with someone like ever. I have to remain calm and cool. I have to be able to control it to be able to stay in that conversation and still logically communicate. One instance I had growing up, this it, not related to, well, I did get angry for it, but it was more like that struggle of I didn't know what to do, I didn't know who to report to, and growing up being a boy, being a man, like being in high school, I got bullied on a bus. Like I had a kid draw on me with a pen several days, and I didn't know to report it to a bus driver because like I mentioned this before. I'm like, bus driver is just the mean person who screams at people to sit down and shut up. That's it.
Yeah.
And then like being a boy, you're told, okay, you got to defend yourself. And after the incidents, I had several people like, I'm surprised you went through that. Why didn't you deck the kid? Like if I were in your place, I would have decked the kid. I'm like, because I'm told growing up that if I punch somebody, I get in trouble.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I can't defend myself because I get in trouble. If I scream and yell at the kid, I go nonverbal. Not that I knew back then, but I would. I just had to kind of put up with it
Yeah.
until like a parent finally noticed and like, okay, what's going on? And then, okay, you got to report it to the bus driver, and then it got fixed. But it took up to that point. And by then, it was at a point where I wasn't really communicating too much with my parents either because there was that domestic situation going on. And growing up, I also didn't know, hey, you can go to a guidance counselor and talk to them about this stuff because I didn't know what a guidance counselor was. My first introduction to a guidance counselor was in first grade, and they took me into a room and played puzzles. So
Wow.
that was the association with guidance counselor.
Yeah.
No explanation whatsoever aside from that.
Uh, you
So,
know, I really want to like put this out there for the teachers, for our community workers out there. I understand that you have a very, very tough job, but at the same time, you do have to identify when bullying is happening, because bullying happens to autistic children and autistic adults, autistic people every single day. You have to know what that looks like. And even if we as autistic people don't know that this person is actually bullying us, step in, stand up for us, because of the fact that we might not know what some form of communication might actually be somebody bullying us. There was actually a couple girls in my choir class in my senior year of high school that I found out from another peer was actually writing on the back of my chair, and I didn't notice it. I didn't know anything about it until I saw pictures online of it. And I remember seeing that, and I remember just feeling so much shame. I also remember that this person wrote an entire website and tried to impersonate me on that website. And it took me actually identifying, oh, hey, this person really is bullying me because they're impersonating me and they're saying things that I would not normally say. So then what I did was I actually wrote a comment back on that website saying I would never say any of those things. This is not who I am as a person. I actually like wrote a pretty long paragraph about it, and I ended up submitting it, and that the bullying ended up stopping because of that. It should not have to get to that point. And teachers and counselors and bus drivers and anybody who works with children has to be able to identify bullying, because that is how we get more representation. That's how we end up getting the help that we need.
yeah, and there's a number of things about that that would need to be addressed as well. One, what is bullying? I've seen even adults who are on the spectrum still misconstrue like what bullying might actually be. And bullying is an intentional, repetitive action done to like inflict harm or like demean someone. It is not necessarily, oh, they were like, you didn't agree with what they did type of thing. It's got to be like full on intentional. The other side of it is, yes, cyber is a whole slew of problems, especially for those on the spectrum, especially at a young age when they're trying to like really fit in really hard and try to please everybody. And that's where they can be at their most vulnerable. Online, like reputations get slammed really hard, really quickly. And that could be very detrimental to someone's well being, their state of mind. And not to
Yeah.
mention socially overwhelming the number of things you would have to possibly keep up with. It's one of the reasons why I stay off of it.
Yeah, people can be really nasty. And you mentioned a really beautiful point about cyberbullying. Though cyberbullying and the internet is still fairly new, at the same time, cyberbullying, I find, often happens at a more extreme rate. And also some of the things that are said through online bullying, those people will never come up to your face and actually say those things, but they will gladly rip you apart online. I remember there was this one social media app out there called Formspring, and it was an anonymous, I'm going to be honest with you about how I feel type of inbox. And I remember seeing so many horrible things come into my inbox, about how I was way too fat, about how I should harm myself, and you shouldn't be hearing those types of things. I'm lucky enough to know that that is a form of bullying, but not everyone understands that, unfortunately. And it really, parents and teachers and everybody, please understand that from an autistic person's perspective, it is not easy to identify what bullying really looks like and how to actually stop the other people from bullying.
And it could take many different forms at many different ages too. Like in a classroom, if you have students that are well aware of the buttons to push to get a student to be overstimulated and cause a ruckus just to disrupt the class, it is going to happen.
Yeah,
And finding those causes are going to be very beneficial to the person who is on the spectrum to prevent one, them from possibly getting in trouble, because some will unfortunately retaliate physically before they even retaliate verbally because of just being able to contain themselves, or they've been repressing it so much that they finally do snap and unfortunately do retaliate physically.
yeah,
Some can only express themselves physically, so it might look like they're attempting to hurt either themselves or somebody else when they're just trying to release all this pent up and nervous energy from being overstimulated.
absolutely. And you mentioned like defending yourself a little earlier. You mentioned about how you can't defend yourself because you get in trouble, but sometimes even reporting the person can also get you in trouble. There have been instances where I've actually talked about being bullied and a teacher overheard me, and because of that they made the decision to report the instance of bullying that happened. But then I got in trouble with my own friend group and actually lost some friends as a result, which, come to find out, those people were not real friends in the first place. But there's this stigma also against bullying, which is also probably why, in my opinion, the bullying rate for autistic people is low, because there is an attached stigma. You do something that is considered quote unquote weird, you're going to get bullied for it. You report someone for being bullied, you're going to continue to get bullied. There's this negative cycle of, why can't we just actually be okay with reporting and saying something? The shame behind it, and also not being believed, that's a whole other story
Oh
too.
yeah, that gets compounded with history of our experiences with being like, okay, we can't stand the sensitivity of certain textures or certain foods, and we're considered weird or it's all in your head type of thing. Where it's like, no, this is what we're experiencing. We don't like it. Please listen to us. And we spend our lives being told like that's not that big of a deal, not big of a problem. So we get constantly quell our problems that we have that we don't like. Okay, is anything worth even telling anybody? Because do they believe us? Or should I just try to push through and get through my day and my life just so I can get back to my safe zone and just be myself in my little area? That's
Yeah.
not a good thing. And on top of that, you have the compounded problem of being on the spectrum, especially at later ages when you hit middle school, high school, where you start getting isolated because of being socially different, socially behind, and having the monotropic interests that also isolate you. That
Absolutely.
that makes you a prime target for bullies. And then because of all that added stress, anxiety, and arguably depression, you also carry yourself very poorly, which also makes you an additional target. Anybody that's slunched over, hunched shoulders, head down while they're walking, prime target for bullies.
Oh yeah,
Just
absolutely.
posture alone is big in that.
I am so glad you brought that up. I remember personally being bullied because I wouldn't look somebody directly at their face in middle school, and it's like, I don't want to look at you. What's wrong with that? Why can't I just look at the ground? Like, this is a comfort thing for me. I'm listening to you, but just because I'm not looking at your face doesn't mean that you should make fun of me for that. And also, you mentioned something really interesting about it. I think about what I do as a career as a board certified behavior analyst. And one of the things that is often taught is it a big problem or a small problem? And I hate working on that. And it's because, the fact that scenarios may be perceived as a small problem to a neurotypical person. For example, if someone like points and laughs, it might not be necessarily a big problem to you, but it is a big problem to the person that's being made fun of, because ultimately their self-esteem is being placed at risk. Their mental health is at risk. That can lead to very serious harmful effects. Unfortunately, the suicide rate for women on the spectrum is much higher than those women without autism. I
Save it
think
for men.
exactly, exactly. So programs like that, when as a behavior analyst, when I'm teaching those things, I don't teach it as why it's a big or small problem to me. It's okay, you might think it's this, but the reason why I feel like this is because of this. And then on that point, I say, you know what? Your feelings are valid. And that's how it should be across the board.
I agree. And from my martial art background, that's where the body posture stuff comes in. Because, like, for some of the kids I'm working with, okay, we're going to be like, okay, you're going to stand up straight. You're going to be more open in your posture. It might seem very scary to be like that, but trust me, you're going to look like less of a target by doing so. It helps physiologically exude that confidence by giving yourself that confidence by standing like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad that posture is, something that people find something to bully about. It's actually just really frustrating in general that anybody will find anything to bully somebody about. But why don't you take a look at the person for who they are and find 5 positive things in them rather than focus on the one negative? Unfortunately, that's how bullying starts is you pinpoint one negative thing and then all of a sudden, boom, there's a cycle and it just never seems to stop.
We need to be able to be more inclusive, more understanding of the neurodivergence that exists in this world. And it definitely needs to happen in schools. It needs to happen in a lot more places than it is.
Yeah. you know, us as autistic people and us as people with disabilities in general, we are taught to act like a neurotypical person. We are expected to behave in a neurotypical fashion. But why can't neurotypical people actually learn to adapt and, be able to be inclusive? That's something that I will forever talk about until my dying day. Inclusivity is not just allowing an autistic person to be a part of your world. It's actually being understanding, showing kindness. If you see a sign of bullying, standing up for them or standing with them through the bullying.
That brings up a good point about bystanders. So anybody that sees bullying is obligated to report it. If you just stand there, do nothing, and don't report it, you're just as much as guilty as the person doing the bullying.
Absolutely. You know, you may feel like, oh, well, there's this stigma behind reporting, but let's be completely honest here. You standing there and doing nothing, you standing there and ultimately just sort of like twiddling your thumbs at when this happens, you are guilty. You are guilty of bullying just as much as the person is doing it because you're not intervening, you're not stepping in, and you're not giving the person the help that they need in that moment.
And you're also empowering the bully by giving them an audience,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
encouraging their behavior, and they may even do worse for having an audience.
They will find a way to make the situation worse, especially if you have a bystander, someone who's just looking by, or even like maybe like whether that be encouraging them or nodding their head or indicating that, yeah, like I agree with the bully is right, which that should never be the case. Unfortunately, that's not how our world works.
Yeah, and in those situations, if you are a bystander, please get to the nearest adult. And if they don't want to listen, find the next higher up adult. Because it should be allowed. If you're in a school, most schools nowadays have strict no bullying policies, so there is a chain of command to report to.
Find somebody to talk to in general. If you're a bystander, if you notice that someone with a disability who may not be able to stand up for themselves, or, if someone needs some assistance with bullying, please, in some capacity, whether that be reporting to an adult, that person doesn't believe you, move on to the next person, keep going until there's somebody who is listening to you, because any form of bullying needs to be acted upon in the highest way possible. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's episode about bullying. Our next episode is going to be all about employment. So we're looking forward to having you listen to the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.